The outer work portion is probably the one that you've already tried so far. Kind of debating them, trying to convince them that they're wrong, trying to give them facts, send them videos, send them articles, right? Try to explain why their views are misguided, what they might be missing, and that probably doesn't work, right? Maybe it just makes them dig in their heels more. And so you might feel stuck. Well, does that mean I have to leave? That I have to kick them out of my life? That I have to send them even more stuff to try to convince them, find the best possible article, the best possible video to send them? Right? That's probably not going to work. So um, this is where the inner work comes in that I'll talk about in a minute. But the other piece of the outer work here is recognizing what is actually effective in these kinds of situations. And what a lot of research shows is that the facts, the debate, the convincing really is not at all effective. If you think about it, how often in your life has someone given you facts, just told you statistics or, arguments that have made you change one of your fundamental viewpoints about the world? Probably doesn't happen very often, right? They just say one thing and suddenly, oh my God, you're so right. I never saw it that way. The exceptions may be if you are an ENTP like me. We're the debater type, so we have this really weird thing that happens in our mind where sometimes it is like a puzzle piece just clicking into place. Or if they just give just the right argument, it's like, oh my God, all right, I'm convinced, done. But we're weird. Most people are not like that. So, what is effective then if it's not just giving them more facts? So essentially, research shows there are really two things that tend to work a lot better. One is curiosity. And this is really hard when it feels like it's obvious that they're wrong. Right? It's obvious that they're terribly misguided. But the key here is showing them that you really want to understand their perspective. You want to understand how they see things. So this again is where the inner work comes in, of really coming in with compassion and curiosity and groundedness, breathing, right? But trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, even if you think you already understand, even if you think you already know what they're going to say, to just say, hey, mom, or whoever, I recognize we don't really seem to see eye to eye to this, and I really want to understand better. Could you help me understand what makes you feel this way? Or what feels scary for you when you imagine this happening? What feels unsettling to you? So it's you're purposely steering away from kind of the political conversations, the debates, the kind of can you back that up with any facts, mom? What's your source? Right? Instead, you're just saying, hey, I want to understand you, mom. I want to just understand your perspective. What do you feel about this? What are you worried about, really, deep down? And, sometimes that can be really tough if there are generational differences. Often older people, parents will, not be as comfortable explaining feelings, going into nuance. So it can be really frustrating, for sure. But you can at least try to understand better. Hey, Mom, what might I be missing here? Like, I'm having trouble understanding this. Is there some way you think you could help me understand your perspective, where you're coming from? And then the other approach here is sharing your own feelings. So this is a super useful skill in all types of conflict resolution. If you're fighting with your partner, whatever, to practice using I statements instead of you statements. So instead of saying, how could you think this way? How could you treat people this way? You say, hey, when I hear you talking about things like that, I feel a bit scared. Or I feel a bit sad. Or I notice I feel kind of disconnected from you. And then a nice thing you can add here is what you want. Kind of a positive, like, I notice this makes us feel distant, and I want to be close to you. I want to have the kind of connection that we used to have. So that's why I want to better understand you, and I want you to better understand me. Right? So kind of talking about what you notice happening right now in the relational field, what you notice happening inside yourself, in your body, and your emotions, and then saying what you want to give that kind of hope, that optimism, that reaching for them. I care about you, even though this has been hard. So that's the outer work. refining your communication skills, refining your empathy, your curiosity. That's hard work. I'm betting you're already pretty good at that. And um, I can tell you, as someone who's done an immense amount of work on those skills, um, I've been pretty good at it for a long time, and I still recognize that there's so much deeper I can go. I've read so many books on conflict resolution and communication, and I can just see there's so much deeper. So I encourage you to keep pushing yourself to refine your communication. Um, and then the inner work piece is uh, grounding yourself, right, before you go into a conversation like that, taking some deep breaths in through the nose, longer out through the mouth. Feel your feet on the ground or your butt on the chair. Just calm your body, soften. Notice if you're holding tension in your shoulders, your jaw, rubbing it out. Whew. So getting yourself ready to go into that with softness instead of kind of going in for battle. Or, if you're dealing with very challenging people who are very outspoken and, are making strong remarks that are really hurtful, then yeah, maybe you need to go in with armor, to go in imagining kind of a bubble of protection around yourself. That's a legit strategy too. You have to kind of feel into how safe is this situation, right? Or it might be that cutting them out is the right answer, right? If they really are unsafe, if they are really hurtful, maybe the time for conversations is over. And that's totally legit. But if it does feel like it's safe enough for you to go in there with softness and openness, then there are different ways you can kind of cultivate that ability. Meditation is a big one, to practice just being with your emotions, noticing what's there. There is loving kindness practice in the meditation world called metta. And essentially that's a way of cultivating every day. You practice for a few minutes, just imagining giving compassion to people. And the basic idea is you kind of start with imagining giving compassion to someone that's really easy to do that for, like a baby or your pet or your loved one. You really just feel into that for a few minutes. Imagine like sending them love, sending them compassion. And then once you've done that, once you've kind of warmed up that channel, that muscle, then you imagine a more difficult person. You imagine sending them empathy, being curious about them. Even someone who seems like a horrible person, still it can be valuable to practice empathy, just to build that muscle. And then the other piece of the inner work is really just resting in the possibility that they might never change. Your relationship with them might never change. It might never improve. And that can be really difficult. But it can also be freeing sometimes, especially with parents, older people, to really accept like they have had this kind of mind for a long time. Most likely it's not going to change. Most likely they're stuck in their fixed views, unfortunately. So can you love them knowing that they have those fixed views? And from the more Buddhist or existential perspective, it's possible to see them as kind of a being that has kind of beautiful consciousness within it, but it's also kind of stuck in a certain set of patterns, a certain set of conditionings, really neural networks that have been ingrained in that brain for a long time. So, some people just are not going to change. And you can still see that they might be a loving person in many ways. They might be someone, who really deserves your care. And they might sometimes say things that you bristle at. They might be ways of seeing the world that are really outdated or really fixed. And you wish they were more open, but maybe they won't be. So that can be some of the hardest work, is just accepting this is reality. This is how it is. This might just be what our relationship looks like. And what I can tell you, having practiced that myself, is it can be hard for a while to just, it's grief, right? It's kind of like a death, recognizing that I wanted this to be a certain way, and that dream has kind of died. But once that impossible dream has died, then something new can blossom that's not exactly what you wanted, but it is what's possible. And that can be sweet too. So I invite you now to practice just thinking a bit about someone in your life that you've had these kinds of challenges around, and and think a bit about what might be the inner work there. How might you improve your communication, your empathy, or your acceptance of what it is, reality as it is? And then what's so the outer work of how might you improve your communication, and the inner work of acceptance and practicing your grounding and having compassion for yourself and compassion for them. All right. Love to hear from you in the comments. I hope this is helpful and supportive for you. I wish you a nourishing day.